One of the many things that I took with me after leaving Poland in this particular march was the fact that most of the survivors that were there were 80 survivors from the Holocaust. Most of these people were kids, children during the Holocaust. Actually, the vast majority of the survivors were born during the Holocaust. Rosa, one of the survivors that shared her testimony with us, she was born in the Warsaw Ghetto. And without going into many details about her story, what shocked me is the idea that there was love in the Warsaw Ghetto. For children to be born in the midst of the horror, there needs to be love. And I asked her about her parents and how they got married. And she said that during one of the epidemics of typhus at the ghetto, her grandmother became sick. And so her father was dating, seeing this woman. They were not sure if it was serious or not, but they were deeply in love, and they went to the house of the grandmother to share the news that he was dating someone, he was seeing someone, he wanted to introduce her to his mother, and his mother said, like, what are you waiting for? If you already found the person you love, and we don't know how much longer we're going to survive, you need to get married. And they said, but there's, we need to talk to a rabbi. And the mother said, like, there's no need for any of that. Go get Shloime, the neighbor, and tell him to bring a tablecloth and some vodka. And that's how they got married. They made a minyan with the people who lived in that building. They used a tablecloth as a chuppah, whatever schnapps they had, they used it for the blessings, and the rest is history. And she was born in that context. There was another survivor that shared her testimony with us. She was a survivor from the camp of Mauthausen. She says that she saw later in the documentation from that camp that the gas used for killing Jews, they ran out of gas on April 28th, 1945. This woman was born on April 29th. Had they run out of gas 2 days later, her mother, of course, wouldn't have passed the selection. 9-month pregnant woman doesn't pass the selection. And so all of these situations of children that were born during the Holocaust made me think about our people's ability to find love, light, and hope, even in the darkest moments of our history. This week's Parsha and this week's Haftorah both have the intertwining of moments of joy and celebration with moments of utter tragedy. In the Parsha, it is the dedication of the Mishkan, the 8th day. The Israelites are rejoicing because they finally built this portable sanctuary that is going to enable them to connect with God in the journey through the wilderness. And Nadav and Avihu, the children of Aaron, die in the midst of that celebration. In the Haftorah, it is King David transporting the Holy Ark to Jerusalem, while a person who is part of his entourage by the name of Uzzah gets killed because he approaches too close to the Holy. And if there's something that these two tragedies have in common, it's not only the fact that they happen in the midst of celebration, but also that the Jewish people are not paralyzed by them, that they continued marching and dancing and celebrating and telling the story. And you know what? I strongly believe that that's what has kept our people alive. This march was different for me because on our bus there were some leaders from the Holocaust Museum of Buenos Aires, but mainly journalists from Latin American newspapers, mostly from Argentina, TV channels, radio presenters. And I could see how what was obvious for me was not obvious for them. How can a people, in the midst of that tragedy, while they are walking through the horror, continue having children? How come Agam Berger, remember Agam Berger, one of the Israeli soldiers that spent 500 days in captivity? So I saw her yesterday. She was playing the violin on a stage at Auschwitz. Even more, she was playing a violin that was 120 years old and was rescued from the Holocaust. That's not normal. That's not normal. The idea that a nation can recover from the ashes and continue dancing, the idea that the people can think of having babies and building families while the Nazis are knocking on our doors to take us to the gas chambers is not normal. At the end of the trip, someone said, can you summarize in one word, what does all mean to you? And I chose the word tikva, the word hope. And I explained that even if it looks too dark and too horrific and too difficult to process, you must know that next week, the Jewish people will be dancing, celebrating another anniversary of the independence of our homeland, of the Jewish state. And not only that, but the fact that that happened just 3 years after Auschwitz is a testament to how much our people can do and can create and can rejoice and can celebrate while we are still recovering from the ashes. I told them the story of one of our survivors who comes to shul every Shabbos morning, Zoltan, who was, I don't know, maybe he was 40 kilos when he left Auschwitz. 80 pounds, 90 pounds, and 3 years later he was fighting for the IDF. That's the history of our people. The history of our people is the history of a people who keeps its hope in the middle of the horror because we know that it's never going to be perfect, but it's always going to be better. And one of the questions that stayed with me after the march is that if we were able to do that, then we need to keep our hopes that everything can happen. And I want to leave you with one last thought. I was in Warsaw a week ago. April 19 is the anniversary, the civil anniversary of the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto. And I was walking the streets of Warsaw, coming back from shul to the hotel, and I saw a lot of people, way more than the amount of Jews that live in Warsaw, wearing yellow daffodils, which are the symbol of the Jewish resistance of the ghetto. Marek Edelman, one of the leaders of the ghetto resistance, kind of created this ritual in Poland that on the anniversary of the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, people wear yellow daffodils. Now this is only 80 years after, 82, 83 years after the ghetto uprising. And the Polish people, the Catholic ones, not the Jewish, but everyone there was remembering the heroic uprising of the ghetto. Not only that, at noon last Saturday, on the streets of Warsaw, there was a siren, just like in Jerusalem. Now, can you think about that when you put that together with the stories of how the Poles collaborated with the Nazis and in some occasions inflicting even more pain to the Jews than the Germans themselves? It's only 80 years that separates the horror from the light. The Poles that were massacring Jews with the Poles that are wearing yellow daffodils honoring the heroic uprising. So if 80 years later in Poland we can feel welcome, by the way, I've been in many places in Europe, there are not many places where I walk safely with a kippah, like in Warsaw. More than in London, more than in Paris, certainly more than in Amsterdam or Brussels. You can wear your kippah in Warsaw and get only gestures of love and solidarity. So if that is possible, if people can have children in the ghetto, if someone can say that he feels welcome with the yarmulke in the streets of Warsaw, then everything is possible. And so in these difficult times for our people, in these times in which we seem to be losing our hopes because it's been more than 500 days and still 59 of our brothers and sisters are being captives in the tunnels of Gaza. Who knows what can happen in 50, in 60, in 70 years? We are the people of dreaming with the impossible. We are the people of intertwining the dancing with the crying, the tragedy with the celebration. This coming week will be perhaps encapsulates better than any other time in the calendar that feeling. We will cry over the high cost, the high price that we paid to have an independent state, and hours later we will dance chorus and rejoice. Yom Hazikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut. So I want to encourage you all in this week in which the Jewish people remembers the tragedy and the horror and the threat of exterminations, to also remember that it was with tikva, with hope, that we were able to move forward, that we were able to establish and celebrate our own state, and hopefully that one day we will see peace.